Hi, and welcome to another episode of Life Lessons with Scott and Friends. And tonight, I have a very special friend who happens to be my one of my daughters, Andrea. I'm so glad you're able to join us tonight, and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to help your old man out.
Thanks for having me.
As you know, in the last several weeks, I've had Clayton and Ryan on. We've talked about being newlyweds and starting to raise a family. And last week, Clayton and I discussed parenting and some of the some of the key components that we thought were important as we began raising a family, and even through today, and all the nuances of that. And so I thought it would be good. I mentioned to you and the other kids about I'd love to have you come on and just kind of give the other side that maybe we have a conversation about what it was like growing up in the Dorsey household, some of the things that you may have experienced, and get your viewpoint from the other side, more or less. And so I'll start it off this way. Um, what's some things that you remember growing up that we may have done, um, or what was it like, um, being raised in the Dorsey house? Just some of your thoughts or initial thoughts along that line.
Sure. I mean, that's very open-ended. I feel like it could go a lot of different ways, but um, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the focus on togetherness, as cliche as that might sound, that things are always focused about, no matter how scattered our lives might have been, especially as we got older and we're involved in different things. There was always a priority on kind of coming back together as a family unit and reconnecting at the end of a week or sometimes a month, in those especially crazy for sports kind of times. But also finding those things that we could all do together that were activities. But I think back to forced times when we all had our different activities, but we were all piled in the Durango every Friday night for games and stuff. So even though we were all kind of doing our own thing, we were kind of able to be together in that, which was always fun.
Yeah. So as you were talking about, I went back to when you guys were younger, and something that was very important to your mom was where we had game night.
I was
Uh,
about to say family Friday game night.
yeah. So living in Palm Harbor at the time, yeah, we would all come together on Friday night, and but again, you guys had all of your own activities. Kim was a swimmer, you were the skater, Kyle was baseball, Ryan was soccer, and depending on what part of the year we were in, well, you and Kim stayed busy year round, but yeah, game night was not to be missed, and I'm thankful to your mom for kind of holding that together and making that a priority for us. So, what do you remember most about game nights?
Well, this I'll come back to that, but on, it might be a little too early in the discussion to kind of dive into discipline, but with that, you know, we as much as we looked forward to it, and I have very fond memories of it, I also think of the times when we had other invites and we had other things that we wanted to do, and it was, kind of wait, why does this have to be this night over everything else, or this activity as a family together over everything else? And the fact that like we weren't always totally on board with it, that like realistic push, of a family that, thinking back now, I'm really thankful that there was that like non-negotiable, because I think it's one of those things where like one week slips, 2 weeks go by, a
Yep.
year goes by, and you never really like get back together to that point. So, I think there was a healthy amount of discipline and through a lot of our lives, but it wasn't like it was very purposeful,
Right.
and it did create some really good, authentic, like fun times.
Yeah, that's a good point because it was we didn't schedule anything. And from myself to mom to your kids, it was Friday night game nights. And um, there were some exceptions, but typically, you're right. We didn't miss Friday night game nights. Yeah. So
But yeah, I mean, as far as I don't think any one like activity or night in particular stands out. More of a cumulative, just good thoughts about those times. But I think it was also like allowed to be different. There were some nights that turned into like really deep, serious conversations. Others that we were like watching comedy and laughing hysterically and never said a thing about our weeks. There was others that were games and end up in like philosophical discussions or whatnot. Other times that we had concerts. So, everything in between.
all right, so you have to explain the concerts. People may not understand what that is.
I wish I had a photo of us gathered in the living room, our little socks with a Swiffer guitar. And I mean, honestly, I don't even know what all we used, but we each had our own instrument.
Hmm.
And Ryan was usually up front and center as our band leader.
Yeah.
And we would just put on a very wide variety. I know you've spoken about music already and, the importance that it had to you growing up and to us as well. Um, so very wide variety of genre, but we all had our little parts to play and would jam along on the broom or drum along with spoons from the kitchen.
Oh yeah, there was never a better air band than
No.
The Dorsey group. Um, so one of the things you brought up that was how Friday nights would take a life of their own from Friday to Friday. And for me as a parent, thinking about being in Florida, you guys were younger, middle school and elementary school, and then coming back to Sugar Hill. I was reminded of how the conversations changed from when you guys were
Yeah.
little to even after you guys had gone away to school even and come back home, how much I enjoyed watching you guys develop and become your own people with your own thoughts and beliefs. And um, it is interesting how some of those Friday nights would be game night intended, but we would end up talking about anything and everything and never really play the game, whatever game it was. So yeah, that's it, it, um, my fondest memories are the Friday nights. Some of them, my fondest memories, just as a family and taking our trips together.
Mm, a
Um,
lot of road trips.
yeah. So what were I'll lead you. So what was a typical summer like for you guys in relation to trips and whatnot?
A typical summer, depending where we were living at the time, I think of a few summers in a row that we were living in Florida and we would pack up all of our belongings, not really, but pack up for a pretty long trip. And we would stop in Moultrie to see Mimi and Papa. We'd stop up in Atlanta, see all our friends and family there. We would always stop in Paducah, Kentucky, not because it's memorable, but because it had a hotel right off the highway and it was halfway in between.
Right.
And we'd head up to Illinois and spend some time in Rockford and Chicago, go up to Wisconsin and see Grandpa, travel around from there, and then head back down. So yeah, lots of time in the car. We learned to entertain ourselves pretty well. Um, and yeah, I got to see, a lot of friends and family that I think we otherwise like wouldn't have really been able to keep in touch with. And I think of, now even people that we're close with that we never really lived nearby, but we were able to maintain those relationships growing up, because we took the time to travel around. And it's funny even now because, Mike and I, when we travel, we typically take road trips too. And we haven't quite gotten that extensive, but even heading, going from New Jersey to Georgia, we've done that trip more times than I can count. And,
Yep.
a lot of our friends are like, wait, why are you guys driving? Like, that's crazy. But for us, thankfully for him too, because he actually, grew up doing a very similar road trip from Jersey to Georgia too. So, um, for us, it's just like easier to be able to kind of take our time, load up on our favorite road trip snacks and good tunes, and you know, be able to stop everyone along the way.
Yeah. So typically when you guys would take off, I would stay at home and keep working. But sometimes you guys would be gone like 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I
Yeah.
remember one summer you guys were gone just about the whole summer. Um, and that year, I actually got to fly up and
Yeah, I
spend
remember you
the
coming to like join us, at different
yeah.
checkpoints on the trip.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and credit to your mom because she would use those trips to like um, teach history that you guys would
Yeah, we
have
got to
different
see a lot of
stops.
like miles, like different places, along the way. And, I said our usual route, but of course, sometimes things we got diverted a little bit or got to stop and see some things along the way that, probably would have never seen otherwise.
So for kids, any kids who may listen to this, how would you entertain yourselves? That's got to be because this is pre cell phone.
Great cell phone. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Pre unlimited data.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it depends on the age. I mean, I can think of, at one point there was like a collection of crossword puzzles and coloring books. We'd find these like activity books at a rest stop that had, different travel things. We played the alphabet game a lot. I'm sure we got into plenty of arguments that kept us all silent for a little bit of the time. That probably helped. Music, of course, we all had our like CDs or cassette tapes, depending on how far back we're going. Um, so we'd barter for like who got to play their favorite song next, and I'm trying to think what else.
It's funny. Your mom and I were talking a couple days ago about one of the episodes recently, and she was she reminded me of you guys like going to the library just to go to the library, and that how she would say, "All right, listen, we're about to go to the library, so remember we got to be quiet." So um, I hadn't heard this, but she said that she would tell you guys, "All right, let's get all the giggles and all the yelling, and be loud, whatever." And so I picture my wife and you four kids all in the car, just losing your minds before you go into the library where you have to know where you have to be quiet. So that was
Yeah, those are the times that I'm thankful that cell phones and videotaping everything was not as prevalent, because I can bet you if I had my kids do that, I would definitely be videotaping them. Um, and it would just be very incriminating videos to have around. So I'm thankful that that was not captured on film. But yeah, I forgot about that. But yeah, we it would be like, heads up, guys, like you're not going to be able to say whatever you want or be as loud as you want. So get it out now. And then when you have to be quiet, you can't say that you didn't have the opportunity to not be quiet earlier.
right. Yeah, that was such a great story when she reminded me of that. So what are not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, what would you say was looking back on it? What are some things or something that man, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but now I do. Um, I know you mentioned one earlier, but are there any other?
Um, this is a silly one, but I think it's a good example. Um, you mentioned with Clayton the Santa Claus.
Mm,
There I do remember a period of time growing up where I kind of felt left out because all of my friends had this like cool experience of this, you know, imaginary creature, knowing, knowing that it wasn't real, but also feeling like that, part of the magic of Christmas, was not experienced the same way that my friends had experienced it. But on the flip side, and knowing the reasoning behind it, and even thinking ahead to like what I would do,
Right.
um, I do really appreciate the emphasis always, on honesty. And I think, as much as I might have felt like I was missing out on something back then, how much more would it have affected me? Again, that just being one example, but if in general you guys didn't have such an emphasis on, you know, being upfront and honest about everything to where like, I never had to doubt like, oh, you know, this is not really what's going on, or I feel like there's something, being held back or whatever. So silly example, but
No, I think a really it's a good example, and it was because of our conviction of trying to be as authentic and um, trustworthy as we could with you guys, um, led to that. And so it wasn't an easy decision by any means, because anyone that knows my mom and dad, like Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Easter, the big four, it's like you go all in. And
mhm.
they they had a real hard time with us and the position that we took. And so
Well, I think also as we got older, there was able to be this cool mix of it where like we kind of embraced, you know, you guys would address stuff as like Santa and Mrs. Claus, and we would, you know, have these like running jokes about things. And so, as we got older and understood and kind of like came to terms with like, just because it's not real doesn't mean that we can't still, it's not taking away from like
yeah,
the real, you know, the real magic of Christmas, but we can still have fun with it along the way. So I think we added that back in as, as we got older.
that's good. So I'm looking at the time. We're second part of this episode, part two, I guess, will be your sister's coming on shortly. So looking forward to having her on and get her
Yeah.
take on a couple of things. But as we wrap up this episode, is there anything from what you've heard from Clayton or Ryan or myself as far as parenting that um, we may have missed, or not missed, but um, you wonder why, or anything related to that as a kid coming up? What would your advice or lesson be to parents, um, to maybe look out for, or to make sure they do?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I think here, obviously knowing your perspective, but also like hearing Clayton's perspective, and it seems like, pretty similar approaches to things. Um, and at the end of the day, just like you said this, so it's not like something that hasn't been addressed already, but um, just being upfront and on it, honest, like we've already discussed, but also just owning up to like that you don't always have everything together. And, I think that spoke volumes, during our childhood when like things wouldn't, like you could tell when like, okay, they say that this is the right way to do things, but like I know that there's, more to it. Or like if they had just listened to, this other part of it, if they had given me the chance or whatever, but it never stayed there. It was always like, let's circle back,
Yeah,
let's think back on it. Yeah, we could have handled that differently. Or, and so it gave, I think, us a voice, especially again as we got older,
right.
that we felt comfortable, maybe not in the moment, but a few days removed from a situation to circle back and be like, hey, I know you originally said this, or originally, this was your answer, but I really think there is, more to this situation. I'd like you to reconsider this. Or, I know you think this about what I did, but like, here's why. And so I think, early on, it was more not as like intertwined, it was more just you guys saying, like, hey, I'm sorry that didn't work out. But that kind of opened the door as we got older to being, comfortable with
Yeah,
having that dialogue a little bit more than I think if there was this perception of like, I'm your parent and what I say goes, and that's the end of the line. I don't think I would have felt as comfortable being like, we need to talk.
yeah, that's a good word. I think some of that came about as you guys were getting older and um, being homeschool educated, and I would come home and there would be like an issue, and it would be like, okay, what's the issue? And I, at that point, became principal, and I would listen to what the teacher had to say, and then I would listen to what the student had to say. And I think that within the framework of the family as a whole, kind of opened that door, like you're talking about, to hopefully where you guys could approach mom and I and say, I have a question, or I would like to discuss this, or so I think some of that was born just out of that. I could be wrong, but
I think that's a good point. And like I said, just knowing that like, whether it turned out how I wanted to or not, just knowing that like we would be taken seriously.
yeah, yeah. All right. So as we wrap up, who's the most competitive out of the 4 Dorsey kids?
I think we would fight to the death for that title.
That's a fair comment.
Maybe not to the death. I'd step back before that point. But
so I'll ask a follow-up. Out of the 4, who has the worst temper?
I mean, I know the answer to this question. I don't know if I should say that.
Oh no, don't incriminate anyone. I would not wish that upon you. And so with that,
I would say those with the worst tempers, we all have our share, but I think there's all been a lot of growth in that area, especially for the worst offenders.
I would say all 4, and I think I alluded to it on a previous episode. All 4 of you come by it honestly, and so I say we're all still a work in progress. But anyway,
you have 4 very passionate children.
Yes, and with that, get you off the hot seat, and so you don't feel pressured. We'll end this episode of part 1, and we will get started with episode 2. Remember to like, share, tell your friends about this. If there's any subject you would like to see us cover or talk about, love to do that. And if you would want to come on and be a guest, man, I would love that, because I think a lot about life is sharing the journey and learning from each other. And yeah, I'd love for you to be a part in any way you want to be a part. So for now, thanks, take care, and peace.